I've got the chapter 1 notes in front of me.
Okay, great. So we're looking at the first chapter talks about choosing a brokerage. Okay. All right. Now, when you're looking at a brokerage and you're trying to select one, what you want to do is figure out which brokerage is the best for you. Now, the book is mainly focusing on the fact of you understanding the employment options. So the first thing we're going to focus on is commissions. All right. So let's look at the commissions of how some structures are paid. There's a structure that includes a desk fee plan, and then there's a structure that includes a conventional plan, which is just a commission split. So let's say, for example, you sell a house. The typical price right now is in the range of about $400,000 to $500,000. Doesn't matter what you're selling in Toronto, okay, or even the Greater Toronto area. You sell a house for about $400,000. Your average commission is about $10,000 on payout. Now, what your concern is going to be is when you're choosing a brokerage, you want to understand, are you paying a desk fee to rent an office for $500 a month and getting a better commission split? Or are you paying a commission split that's a little bit more broad and a little bit larger, but you don't have an office or a fixed fee per month? So, for example, a lot of people would go with a straight no desk fee. So you would get a check for $10,000. Your commission split would be 90-10. $1,000 would be paid to your brokerage, and you would take home $9,000. Okay. Now you could even look at a desk fee plan that had a commitment amount of maybe $500 a month for a room. Usually it has to be justified, of course, and you would have maybe a commission split of 95-5. So yes, you did pay $500 for a desk fee, but then you only paid $500 for your transaction of the same amount of the $10,000 commission. The only way that would work out in your favor is that if you did multiple transactions and had a desk fee plan that gave you a smaller split. Okay, that would be the difference. Now, when you look at choosing a brokerage, you want to understand if you're going with a franchise or an independent brokerage, because they all have various different opportunities. Now, if you choose to, say, join Remax or Home Life or Sutton Group, they all have royalty fees per month. Okay?
Yep.
So a lot of this will help you in your decision to understand that, do you want to be with Remax and pay $400 a month and get some support systems that you think that might help you. In a lot of cases, from the feedback I've heard from many of my students, and I've been in real estate for over 10 years, so I've been through a lot of different organizations, and I found that the best thing for yourself is just branding yourself with a great team that works hard and creates a great reputation in an ethical standpoint. So people that long last in business are really looking to brand themselves and not so much the brand that they work for. Okay, so let's look at understanding how a brokerage will work in terms of service. When you have a full service brokerage that even has a split of 90-10, you're going to be looking at paying. Sorry about the background noise. I'm just at my wife's house here, so family's house actually. So they've got some pets. So basically what happens in that scenario is that you're looking to see, in a 90-10 office, you're going to get full service at the brokerage where the secretaries will help you write up your offers. You can call them to make appointments. You can call them to scan you documents. You don't even have to step into the office in a lot of occasions. Okay? And now there's other brokerages that charge you a flat fee transaction. There's one company, for example, called Right at Home Realty. They're kind of a sample of what some brokerages charge. So what they do is they do everything literally virtual. You don't get an office, you don't walk in, you don't do anything. You pay $200 to $300 of a transaction charge, and you literally submit in your own documents, and you do your own banking. Like, you'll go put the money in from your client's deposit into the corporate account, which is held in escrow until it's time to go out and be sent to the lawyer. So totally different scenario. They're totally two different working environments. Most agents work really, really well in a full service environment because they get a lot of support. They run into other agents who talk about deals all day, and it's kind of a more healthy environment. It's kind of like working in a stock trade deal, and in that deal, what you want to be able to establish is that it should allow you to find other people that will pick up your investment. Okay. Now, so when you interview with brokerages and you decide to pick one, you want to figure out which one is the best one in terms of cost split, how much time you might have for a free adjustment. Some brokerages will give you 3 months free of no royalty, so you can kind of get adjusted into that environment. Okay. The main difference we're going to cover about brokerages, which is about being independent contractor and employer, just in a short time. We'll move on to that. That's one of the main differences that you'll get maybe quizzed on in the exam. This other stuff that we talked about will give you some general knowledge and some stronger understanding about what it's going to feel like. Okay, so let's move down to the next thing where we talk about organization. So we'll talk about CREA, so Canadian Real Estate Association.
Yep.
So let's just sum it up in simple English here. This is, of course, professionals sitting in Ottawa. So a group of professionals sitting in Ottawa. They're basically organizing how real estate is seen and organized for people that are buying and selling it from a searching standpoint. So, for example, if I open autotrader.com, I can show you how to find cars with many, many dealerships. You don't have to go to all the dealerships separately. So the same idea with CREA. CREA started the Realtors websites like Realtor.ca. And you can now shop for tons of real estate with different brokerages and different agents all in one place.
Okay.
So the great thing there is that you're actually led to the agent who has the listing and not led to an agent who's just trying to sell you on the concept of just selling, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you might want to talk to the agent who has the most information to give you the best price because he's got the listing.
Yeah.
You're hoping that's what the case is, right?
Yeah.
So basically, the CREA organization they own the trademarks for Realtor and Mls. So if you call yourself a realtor and you have a little R in a square box, which is the logo, which goes on your business cards and on your open house and your for sale signs, that logo is owned by CREA. Okay. They also own the logo for MLS, which specifies that you are listing your house on an MLS multiple listing service, which would be our Toronto Real Estate Board. If you are using the Toronto Real Estate Board, you will attract the most buyers in Ontario and maybe a lot of Canada right to you, because prime investment, prime real estate is occurring in two major cities, and that's Vancouver and Toronto right now. They're our busiest cities. They're our strongest cities. I always refer to Toronto as Canada's New York City. It's where all the finance happens. It's great. Investors love it, and they love the demographics of what we have to offer, and the job market in Toronto is always fantastic. It just keeps growing. Now, if there's any federal issues, if there's anything to be lobbied or any kind of international representation, that is exactly the same thing CREA is doing. So, Gareth, if you were sitting in Hong Kong and you wanted to check out properties in Toronto before moving to Toronto, guess what? You'd go on Realtor.ca and you would find your realtor very easily because international representation is done through that website. Whether you use MLS.ca or Realtor.ca, it's one and the same thing. Okay? Now, let's say you are a doctor and you've decided to open your own medical practice in Toronto. You will actually log on to a different website, which is icx.ca, which represents another international website that's managed by CREA for international representation for Canadian commercial real estate. So they've separated it on that website. Okay, so now when you become a realtor, when you finish your 3 courses, you'll become a member of RICO. You'll become a member of CREA automatically because you need to use these websites. You need to have your face on them. You need to have your listings there, and you need to have the use of the trademarks. So you'll be paying a small fee to be a member of them when you complete. So now we'll talk about Orea, where you registered for your courses. That's known as the Atera Real Estate Association. Now they are provincial, so it's only for Ontario. It represents 42,000 agents overall. It provides education to you, and they also provide all the legal forms that are completed. So for Orea, you will be writing your exams with them. You will be taking your base education material from them. And when you are actually practicing as a real estate agent, you will get all your legal forms. They're produced by them within your real estate office that you're working in. Okay?
Yep.
Now, real estate boards, we have 41 boards according to the new textbook from January 2014. Sometimes your textbook might be updated. It sometimes bounces up from 41 to 43. Right now it's 41, so keep an eye on that number. 41 boards operating in the province of Ontario right now. That means you've got a Brampton board, you've got a you've got a board in Mississauga, you've got a board maybe in Milton. So all these real estate boards are responsible for organizing courses and allowing you to be members of theirs. You have to understand that Toronto Real Estate Board is the biggest, the best, has the most to offer for you. It has the greatest resources, has a huge library on Don Mills. The Toronto Real Estate Board can do a lot for you because the exposure itself of you putting up a listing, you'll find that a lot of people will find you and call you. You'll get a lot of leads from there when you're doing listings. Now, they're authorized, the real estate boards are all authorized by CREA to use the trademarks and certifications. Remember that all of these organizations are all non-for-profits. So they're self-managed, of course, right? Kind of like mini government agencies in a way. They're all regulators. So any questions on that? That makes sense? Nice and clear?
That makes sense.
Nice and clear? Okay, great. So now we'll look at the Appraisal Institute of Canada. Now, there's a trick question on the exam. They say that there's something called the Canadian Appraisal Commission of Canada, and they ask you about if that's true or false, and you'll see in our true and false questions that is false. It's known as AIC, so remember what that stands for. It's Appraisal Institute of Canada. It's very specific, and you'll find that they'll use a lot of trick language that will apply to a lot of the names and abbreviations. They throw in a lot of trick questions to throw you off. So try not to be fooled by that. Let me ask you a question, Gareth. Do you understand what is an appraisal? Or what does that maybe mean to you at this point?
An appraisal to me means someone coming in and valuing the home.
Correct, exactly. Now let's break it down a little deeper. Now let's say it's your home. You own a home of $500,000, okay? You live in Toronto. You've paid it off in cash. You don't have a mortgage. You've decided to borrow money. You've decided to call the bank and say, hi, I'd like to put on a mortgage on my place. What do we do now? They're going to say, definitely we're going to appraise the property because you're not selling it. You're not buying it fresh. So we got to determine the value in our eyes. What the lender's going to do is hire an appraiser who gets paid $300 to $600 for that day to come out and see you, okay? Now, when he comes out to see you, he's really working for the bank. And why is that? He's working for the bank because he's going to lend you money based on an appraisal value, which is much lower than the market value. And then on lower than the market value, he's only going to lend you 80%. So he's keeping the bank very, very, very safe. Now, the bank's able to make a profit from lending you the money, but at the same time, they're able to stay very safe so that they're not over-lending you money, so that if the market goes down, and say you borrowed only $300,000, and the market drops the value down to $400,000 from $500,000, you still have an invested interest of $100,000 that you would not walk away from, and the bank knows that. So the bank wants to ensure that you'll make your payments, and the appraisal is essentially working for the lender. If you were to ask the appraiser, hey, can you do me a favor and put the appraisal higher? He would never do that for you because he would get no work because his employer is actually the lender, not you.
Yep.
Right? So we see that point?
Yep.
This will help you understand a few things down the line, so I wanted to kind of get that out of the way now.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll talk about the Real Estate Institute of Canada. These folks have one core function, and it's to create advancement opportunities for persons involved in real estate. So we could take any literal example. If I was the Real Estate Institute of Canada and you were a real estate agent and I wanted to advance you, I could say, I would like to give you iPad training so that you can do business in real estate without any paper. I'm advancing a person in real estate. That could be an example of one of my functions. What they're doing right now would you would have to go onto their website and see what services are being offered. But that's a hypothetical example of what you can expect. Okay? Now, the book wants you to understand how to break down the understanding of a brokerage. Now, let's fast track and pretend you're already a real estate agent now. You've just joined a brokerage, okay?
Yep.
You want to go list your first home. You want to go list your first home and make some money, okay? Now, let's understand this. Let's say you join Remax Condos Plus in downtown Toronto on Queens Quay. It's a beautiful office. I actually work there, so I know it very well. Now, it's a downtown office. Let's say you join that brokerage and you come and list my home. So I've given you my condo facing the lake worth $1 million and you've put it up for sale. Now, you get approached by another Home Life office telling you, hey, Gareth, we will give you a free bus ad with your face on it and give you free advertising if you come join our office. So if you wanted to leave Remax with the listing you just got from me, you can't take the listing with you. And now let's understand why. When you got the listing initially with Remax, the listing actually belongs to Remax. You, Gareth, are representing Remax. And this is in a legal context, okay? Now, even though that Gareth is selling the listing, making the money, getting the commission check, dealing with the client directly, that has nothing to do with the legal context. Legally, the listing belongs to the brokerage that you work for. You're representing the brokerage when you go out and do business. Make sense?
Yep.
So you are legally under like a agent law, basically. There, you can be under now. A brokerage can be a corporation or sole proprietorship. You can literally be Gareth Reed Real Estate Inc. or Gareth Reed Real Estate. That's it. That can be a scenario if you want that. Now we understand that the agency relationship with the principal. Now we are the agent on making an agency relationship. We're making a relationship which is agency. So we're making it with the principal who's the buyer or seller. So if I'm your principal, I'm your buyer or seller. Either one. Doesn't matter. I'm still the principal, okay? Now there's two people usually involved. So the principal consents to the agent to act on behalf. So you have basically, the principal has authorized you. If I told you to list my property, you came and signed the documents with me, I've authorized you to act on my behalf. Okay? So now there is brokers and salespeople that are employed with the brokerage. Now, what's the difference here? Now, you finished your courses. You finished phase 3. You finished phase 1, 2, and 3. And now you've decided to become a salesperson. You actually only can become a salesperson. That's actually known as a temporary salesperson. That's what you are. So if you've done phase 1, 2, and 3, you've registered with RICO, paid all your fees, now you've joined the brokerage, you are a temporary salesperson. All right? Now, when you do your articling courses over the next 2 years while you're working like a regular real estate agent, at that point, when your articling courses have become complete and you've passed them, now you'll be a complete or like full-time salesperson. Okay? Now you'll be a full-time salesperson in the eyes of this qualification process. So you were a temporary salesperson, now you'll be a full salesperson. Okay? Now, you would continue. Now, as you might know, there's some things called continuing education courses. You don't do those till your next 2 years. So the first 2 years are just your articling courses. So you don't do any other continuing education until the next 2 years. Okay?
Goodbye.
Bye. And so what happens there is that the brokerage, if we break down the brokerage once again, the brokerage has a broker of record. What is that similar to? Let's be hypothetical. Let's say that's similar to the United States president. There's only one. So similarly, the broker of record, there's only going to be one. There has to be one, just like the president of the United States. There has to be one as well. Now, underneath the broker, he might have multiple branches that he's managing or owning, which is allowed. And he'll have administrative staff that do maybe check processing, the banking, the registration of new agents, the discontinuation or leaving of agents, or whatever the case is. At the brokerage, there will be salespeople and brokers. So what's the difference now between a salesperson and a broker? Now, the broker has taken more courses than the salesperson, and usually has worked maybe 3 or 4 years after the fact. So you could have done your articling courses, you could have done 2 years of work or 4 years of work, and then you went and did your education to become a broker at that point. Okay? Now the broker has only one major allowance. First, he's got more education to handle a brokerage. That's one. Secondly, he has the right to go and open his own office at any point. He can become his own broker of record. We follow that?
Yep.
Okay. So a lot of this, the definitions are listed out in the REBA 2002, and I'll explain to you in my simple version of English. What does REBA 2002 mean? It's the Real Estate Business Brokers Act. It is basically a very strong and strict rule book of how brokerages, brokers, and salespeople are going to behave professionally, and the rules that they're going to abide by. Okay? Make sense? Okay.
Yep.
Now, so that's what REBA 2002 is. It's your rule book. That's the rules you're going to be following. That's what you're going to be basically reading it, abiding by it, and applying it in your daily practices, right? You want to be in compliance with REBA 2002. Alrighty?
Yep.
So the listing process, we've kind of taken care of that. It comes up again in the notes, but we've really taken care of that. Just remember one thing here, even though the fact that you get the listing and it technically belongs to the brokerage on paper, you still have all of the obligations that are responsible to you. So if there's rules in REBA 2002 that you got to abide by as a salesperson, they still apply to you. You can't say, oh, well, it's not my listing. That listing is actually sitting with the brokerage, so it's not my problem. It doesn't work like that. You're responsible for all the obligations that are connected with having that listing and doing your business. It's one and the same thing. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, so we've talked about commission plans, and that makes sense to us. I've done like the example that I kind of verbally gave you. I think it might have painted the picture for you clearly to understand that even if you have a commission plan that's larger, it's not necessary that you're going to take more money at the end of the year. If you have a commission plan that's smaller and you have a small desk fee, if you actually do multiple transactions per month, that will be cheaper at the end of the year. You can do a hypothetical scenario and say you do one deal a month and you're making $10,000 a month. An average agent does make about $100,000 to $120,000 a year. I mean, I've trained them, so I know. They've told me themselves. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the definition of ICI. That's actually, there's a trick question on the exam for that too. The meaning of ICI stands for industrial, commercial, and investment.
Yep.
In the trick question, I think they changed the word of, I'm not sure if it's industrial or investment. They switch up one of the words to throw you off. But remember what it means. Let's talk about what those mean so we can let's visualize these three things. So when we think of ICI, let's think of a Walmart plaza.
Yep.
Okay, so industrial would be the factory, the warehouse. Okay, where all the goods get shipped and all that stuff. Commercial is literally wherever you go out, Gareth. If you go to a bar, Starbucks, Tim Hortons, your doctor's office, your dentist's office, your schools, your colleges, that's all commercial. Okay, now your investment, the best example to visualize is a rental apartment building. Rental apartment buildings are really popular. They're bought up by big insurance companies because they're amazing investments and they don't stop. They keep buying them up because that's one of the best investments according to them. So commercially, let's think of a rental apartment building as the investment. So with this visual, when we think of ICI, we got the warehouses and the commercial. We got our Starbucks or Tim Hortons as commercial. And then we got our investment, which is our rental apartment building. Okay? Sounds good?
Yep.
Okay. Let's go over the next portion, which is known as the salesperson employee status versus an independent contractor. Okay, so being in Canada, we obviously come across a lot of people that are self-employed. We understand the scenario. You get to write off all your expenses and your bills, and you get to write off your car and your cell phone. So being an independent contractor has those tax advantages. You get to get your own HST number. You're a goods and service provider. You will basically charge someone commission in like a deal, and when the brokerage pays you, you actually also collect HST on top of your commission. So if, Gareth, you're getting a $10,000 commission, you're actually also charging HST of $1,130 on top of that. Okay? Now, of course, on the taxation side, we'll have that discussion later, but on the taxation side, you will collect and report HST, but you may be keeping some of it if you're spending a lot of expenses. It'll all tally out, which you will get advice from your accountant on that. Okay? But it's an important difference to understand. In the employee version of a salesperson, you could work as an employee for a real estate office. Now, there are real estate offices that will take you on as literally as an employee. So they will give you a base salary. Let's say they're giving you a base salary of $30,000 a year. They're going to pay your tax for you because they're paying you salary. And instead of a commission per deal, they might give you like a bonus structure. You might be getting a bonus commission on top of a deal that you process, but it doesn't actually have to really do with a real estate transaction. They're just giving you a commission, a very small commission. This is very similar to a retail environment location. So think of yourself sitting in a store, selling a product. People are walking in, and you're getting a sales commission and a base salary. That's what it would feel like to be an employee salesperson, because now you've got to be reporting to your employer where you are, what you're doing, how much work you're up to. It's literally like working for somebody in a store, right? It feels the same way. You've got someone bothering you to find out what is going on, where you're at with your sales, what have you done today. Versus an independent contractor is based on you, based on your schedule, based on how hard you want to work, and based on how much money you're motivated to go make. Okay, so it all really depends on what you want to do there. Now, when you sign an employee agreement, you're going to sign an employee agreement that's similar to somebody working in an employee environment, because your employee agreement is going to state the Employment Standards Act of Ontario. Your employment agreement is not going to talk about your fees or anything else. Your employee agreement is just going to relate to the fact of how you're going to abide by the laws of Ontario Employment Act. Okay? Now, if you're an independent contractor, this is not the case. You are going to be signing an agreement that's going to specify your commission split. because you don't have a fixed income now. You're going to be writing out what your fees are. So if your first 500 phone calls long distance in the office are free, and every call after that is 25 cents, that fee schedule is going to be in the independent contractor agreement. But it would not be in the employee agreement, because the employee agreement is strictly an employment agreement referring to the act. Okay? Now, if you're an employee and the Employment Standards Act of Ontario says you got to give 2 or 3 weeks notice or whatever the case is, you have to abide by those rules. Okay? Now, if you're an independent contractor, you could work for RE/MAX today, give them notice, and in 24 hours you could be working at another office immediately, because you have the right to. You're independent. So those are some differences. I hope that makes some sense and gives you the visual picture of what the difference feels like for two. A lot of the people that are part-time, there's some people that are teachers or part-time something else, they like the employee structure because they know that they're going to be working for a very limited amount of time in the day, so they want to see some fixed money. The independent contractor sees a lot larger pay. The employee agreement, for example, I'll give you a hypothetical scenario. In the employee status, usually the base salary is like $2,000 a month, okay? And you might get $1,000 commission on top for selling a house. That's an example. If you were an independent contractor, you did the deal, it's a $400,000 house, your average commission is $10K. So huge difference in money.
Yeah.
Huge difference in money, and workload is also different too. Because as the employee, you work 3 times harder to make the same money and still not make the same money. Right?
Yep.
So big difference there. So lastly, the book wants you to understand 3 more things which apply to a condominium. So remember that a condominium, if you know what a condominium is, that's a condo apartment. It's where owners own the unit, and they're personally liable for the condominium debt and the condominium corporation debts. Okay, so if you buy a brand new condo and the maintenance fee is $300 a month, and all of a sudden there's some kind of weather shifting or storm that cracks the side of the building, that has nothing to do with you, but that cost to repair that crack is going to be shared by every single unit owner. So it might be $50 for the next 6 months for you guys to pay for that fee, but it's kind of like being part of a big family where you share all the bills and all the expenses that surprise you guys. So in that scenario, it's good to know that that's what it's going to feel like. Okay? Book also wants you to know in the arrangement of a property manager is very different from a superintendent. A superintendent is like a salary or a hired handyman on site. Why a building has a superintendent is to save money, because every time I call a plumber, it's $400 for him to show up. And if I have a superintendent or a handyman on a full-time pay of $30,000, I'm saving a ton of money.
Yeah.
So I would be a smart property manager, and I would be managing my money very well. And you want to be managing your money very well on site, because you're responsible to report for it also. There's a lot of laws that kick into play when you're a property manager and the compliance by a management company, okay? So we understand that property manager is not a superintendent, but he will hire a superintendent. So property manager will literally just manage the property, pay the bills, look after things, administer, and take care of the staff. Okay? Now, there's something you might see at a new builder construction sales office if you go buy a new condo somewhere. So you've probably been into those places in Toronto where you see for sale signs from builders for condos, right?
I've seen them around, yeah.
Of course. So now when you see those condos for sale signs, you're curious to find out what's going on there. When you walk into those condos, they have salespeople on site, but now there's 2 versions of these salespeople. One version is that it belongs to a real estate corporation, and that person serving you is a real estate agent. Okay. Now, if I'm selling 300 units in a condominium building and I hire you, Gareth, to sell them for me, I'm going to pay you $1,500 per unit, but you got 300 units to sell for me. So if it takes you 2 years to sell my 300 units, you're going to get paid over $300,000 over 2 years. Would you be okay with that? Sure. That's a good pay scale, right? You don't have to leave the office. You don't have to drive. Everyone comes to you and walks through the door. And I pay for all the advertising as the builder. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Now, I could also be economical. I could say that maybe my building office is not making a lot of profit. I want to hire you as like a retail salesperson. So I could hire you kind of like I'd hire a retail salesperson in a shopping center, in a store, and you literally just introduce my product. You don't have any signing authority on the agreements, but I could pay you $35,000 a year and you could sell all my 300 units for me too, right? So there's two scenarios that the builder could utilize. He could have a real estate agent on site who might be a stronger salesperson and may close deals better, or he might hire a salesperson just to do the retail introduction to the product, and then the documents would have to go to the builder, and somebody at the builder's office would have to sign off on them before it becomes a deal. So two different ideas. So it's good to understand the scenario because there's two trick questions that we'll cover later on for that topic. So how's this introduction, and tell me, how do you feel with the notes? Did it give you some much deeper insight?
Yeah.
Do you feel a lot stronger going over the explanation I gave you?
Yeah, I think it's making more sense. Certainly from the last aspect, the brokerage salesperson versus the independent contractor, it's starting to
It makes a lot more sense to you? That's wonderful. Yeah, the purpose of this is you can read the notes and of course it's simple English, you can understand what it says, but we're trying to make you understand what it says and then go ahead and apply it.
Yeah.
So that's chapter 1. So what I'd like to do first with you is just maybe do the first 3 chapters one by one,
Okay.
so it can kind of absorb. And so we'll skip a day. So every other day we'll do a chapter.
Okay, sounds good.
So basically in 12 days we'll finish 6 chapters, and then we'll work on your math.
Okay,
Sounds good?
Yep.
And then we're going to do revision, questions, and mock exams. So we will make sure that you understand everything inside and out.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so what I'll do is I will stop the lesson. I've recorded this lesson for you now.